What's up guys, Matt with BleepinJeep. In this video, I'd like to share with you what you should be doing to prepare yourself for an off-road adventure. A pre-ride checklist, if you will, and no checklist is complete without a little WD-40. So this video is brought to you by WD-40. Let's get started. So I know I said pre-ride checklist, but I actually want to start off on a post-ride checklist, actually during your previous ride. So every time you go on a ride, there's one thing that you need to be doing, and that is making a list of any issues or problems, squeaks, brakes, repairs that need to be fixed. So one of the things you should bring with you is a notepad and a pen, or you can take notes on your phone. Whatever way you choose to do it, it's very important that you make notes. One of the biggest problems that I have is coming back from a ride, I put the Jeep away, and then a month later I go to ride again and I think to myself, oh no, there was something majorly wrong with this Jeep when I put it away last, and now I don't remember what it is. So make sure to make note of what you need to repair for the next outing. Next up on your post-ride checklist, you want to empty out your vehicle and give it a good wash. Get the mud off. A lot of people will do this on the way back to the house or whatever. They'll stop at one of those wash stations if you don't want to do it in your own driveway. And don't forget to clean out your cooler as well. I can't tell you how many times I've forgotten to clean out the cooler and there's been something really rank in there when I go to open it again the next time. So after you wash everything down and it dries up, I'm going to recommend that you spray your vehicle down with something to keep the rust at bay, like WD-40. If you watch the KOH guys and the Baja guys, they'll actually have bare tubes. And why do they do that? Because the first year or two, they need to make changes. They need to cut out tubes, they need to re-weld tubes, they need to make modifications. So to do that, they never paint the vehicle or powder coat the vehicle, and it's just bare metal. And how do they keep that rust from getting all over the metal? They actually spray it down with WD-40. So WD-40 makes this big blast product. You can spray big areas, or an easy reach can with a straw, flexible straw, and you can get into tight spots like that. But for my vehicles, they are painted for the most part. There are some bare metal parts that you need to get though, and anything with joints, anything that you have problem areas with that rust over time, you want to spray those down. Next up, you want to try to park it in the dry or under a cover. If you're really anal about it, put it up on jack stands so you don't get flat spots in your tires. And then watch for leaks before you move it for the next time. So you have a car sitting there for a month maybe before your next ride. If you notice a big puddle on the ground under it, then you'll know that's a problem area and you got to fix that. So that's the minimum that you want to do on your post-ride checklist. Now all of these pre-ride checklist items you can do post-ride if you're really good about it. I am not. So let's move on to the pre-ride checklist. These are the items that you're going to do right before you go out on your ride. Number one, you want to check all the fluids. That includes the oil, the transmission, the brake fluid, the coolant, the power steering fluid, if you have a manual, the clutch fluid, and if you've been in deep water on your previous outing, you want to check your differential fluid and your transfer case fluid. If you know you've got water in there, you probably want to check that post-ride actually. And then you're going to grease all your Zerk fittings. Get underneath the Jeep and find those Zerk fittings. Use your grease gun, and believe it or not, WD-40 makes specialist true multi-purpose grease for your grease gun as well, so you can use WD-40 for that too. Some of the places you might find Zerk fittings: upper and lower ball joints. In my case, RCVs, if I'm running those. I don't usually have Zerk fittings on U-joints. I try to get U-joints that don't have Zerk fittings because those are stronger. They don't have a hollow spot in the middle and they're just bigger and beefier. But upper and lower control arms, a lot of your steering components have Zerk fittings. So anywhere that needs to be greased. Your drive shafts have Zerk fittings. Make sure you put your WD-40 grease in those. Check the air filter, check the belts, and check all your hoses for cracks. Basically, you always want to carry an extra belt just in case, but check that. And if you've got dirt in your air filter, you know, beat that out or replace the air filter. If you have a washable one, go ahead and wash that out. Next on my list, you're going to want to clean the windshield and check the wiper fluid. I can't tell you how many times I've gone out and with a dirty windshield, and it just makes things so much nicer when the windshield is clean. And then if you have wiper fluid, go ahead and top that off, which most of my Jeeps don't, but that is really nice if you do. All right, next up, bolt check. So you want to climb underneath and inspect all the bolts. Bring a bunch of wrenches with you and just see if they need tightening. A lot of times if they're dirty, you can tell. Whenever you're wheeling, when the dirt gets on the nuts and bolts, you can tell which ones are loose, because it'll actually spin and take off that dirt. So you can watch that while you're riding as well. But before you go out, make sure to do a bolt check. While under there checking the bolts, inspect for other wear, things like bad bushings, maybe transmission mounts that are worn out, control arm joints, heim joints, cracks in your frame. Check your ball joints, your unit bearings, your U-joints, your hubs. Now I've got some videos, I'll leave links below on how to check your ball joints, and I've got some other videos that might be of interest to you as well. Things we'll talk about here in a minute, like tool selection. Now speaking of checking your heim joints, I tend to find that heim joints will get noisy. They start squeaking a lot. Even though you're not really supposed to lubricate heim joints, I do lubricate my heim joints, and actually talked to the engineers at WD-40, and they recommend the Specialist Dry Lube. And I haven't been doing that. I've been using just the Easy Reach WD-40 in a can, and it seems to work great, but they say use the dry lube, the WD-40 Specialist Dry Lube. It's got PTFE, which is you know, a non-stick coating in there, and I'm gonna give that a try and see how it goes. But I do lubricate my heim joints, and it just seems to keep them from squeaking and driving me crazy. Next up on my list is to check your tire pressure and check your lug nuts. I usually run at about 4 to 7 pounds depending on which Jeep I'm in. So right before the ride, I'll go ahead and check that pressure, make sure that's good all the way around. And especially if you have aluminum wheels, well, you always want to check your lug nuts to make sure that they're tight. But if you have newer aluminum wheels, those are always the ones that fall off. So make sure you check those regularly. Next up, you want to look over that all your tools are still in the toolbox from the last time that you used it. And make sure that nothing's missing. If it is, you want to find that tool and replace it. Now this video is not about which tools to bring. I've got other videos on that subject, so check the description box below if you want to see that. Make sure you still also have your tow strap, your tree saver, your snatch block, your shackles. These are things that get lost on the previous trip, so make sure that those are still in place. Make sure that you have a jack of some sort, a high lift, some sort of saw, whether that be a chainsaw, a bow saw, or an axe. After that, let's go ahead and examine that your first aid kit is still there. If you've used anything out of it, go ahead and replace that. And make sure your fire extinguisher still is full. A lot of times they'll have a little gauge on them, and make sure that you can get it off too. Make sure that it's removable and easy to access. Okay, things that are often forgotten. Keys. I can't tell you, it hasn't been a lot of times, but there's been several times where somebody will show up, they trailer their Jeep to the trail, and then they don't have the keys for it. So make sure you have keys, put some extra keys in there if you like. Make sure you have your gloves, your winch remote. There's been several times where people forget to bring their winch remote, and a flashlight. You always want to make sure you have a flashlight, not only for if it gets dark and you're still out on the trail, but also if you want to check inside your engine compartment or somewhere where it's dark, you need a flashlight. Alright, of course, make sure you have the necessities like appropriate clothing, water, food, ice. Some people don't even use ice. I can't imagine not having ice, but also sunscreen. Don't want to burn out there. Some other things that people forget to bring often that I see is zip ties, rain gear, a tarp. A tarp is really handy actually to lay on the ground if you need to get under the vehicle and fix something, especially if it's muddy. And rain gear, of course. I can't tell you how many times I've been caught out in the rain without proper rain gear, and we end up using a trash bag. That's another thing you should bring is a trash bag, and make sure you have your phone chargers. Next up, make sure that your air compressor is still working and that you have your CO2 tank if you have one. Air compressor or CO2, one or the other, or both. And then air tools, make sure you have those, your tire tools, and your tire gauge. Next on my list here is to make sure you have a jump box or jumper cables, one or the other. Somebody is always bound to run their battery dead, whether it be you or somebody else. You should always have a jump box or jumper cables. Next up, I already talked about checking the fluids, but you also want to bring the fluids. Here's what I bring. Oil. I always bring 5 quarts of oil, 1 quart of brake fluid, 1 quart of power steering fluid. Depending on my transmission issues that I'm having at the time, I usually just bring 1 quart of transmission fluid. Coolant, I'll usually bring a gallon of pre-mixed coolant. You always want to bring grease, so bring that WD-40 True multi-purpose grease that we talked about, and a grease gun is really handy. That way, if you need to put it in a Zerk fitting, you'll have the grease gun, but if not, you can just pump it out into your hand or whatever. And then you want to bring, of course, regular WD-40 to spray down anything that's squeaking and driving you crazy. So I like to use the WD-40 Easy Reach for that with the flexible straw. I'll just throw that in my glove box somewhere usually. Another thing that you might want to bring is starter fluid in case you need to start somebody's old nasty carburetor, or it actually comes in handy for mounting tires that have come off the rim. Any gas. If you're going out on a long adventure and you need more fuel, make sure that you have an extra gas can. And of course, you always want to bring a funnel. Next up is spare parts that you might need. So here's some of the spare parts that I usually bring. Axle shafts, front and rear, a spare tire if you need one. Make sure that yours is good though. You always want to check the tire pressure on your spare tire. Lug nuts. I've always had a need for extra lug nuts. Valve stems, we actually sell the Colby valve on our website if you want to check that out. It's a valve stem replacement that you can do without pulling the tire off the wheel. You can do it from the outside, so that's pretty cool. Again, that's the Colby valve, and I'll leave a link down below. On Cherokees especially, you want to bring a coil or a CPS sensor, crankshaft position sensor, because those are always going out. Extra fuses, of course, and U-joints. I'm always replacing U-joints on my drive shafts now. I used to always replace them on axle shafts before I got the RCVs. And of course, anything else that you break often. If you're one of those guys that breaks a drive shaft every time you go out, well, you should be carrying extra drive shafts. If your CPS on your Cherokee always goes out, make sure to bring not only your CPS, but all the extensions and sockets that you need to go ahead and replace that on the trail. All right, let's talk about respooling your winch line. You want to respool your winch line at the house and not on the trail, because that's one of the worst things that can happen is you go to free spool it and it's stuck and it's in a rat's nest, and if somebody's trying to help you and you haven't respooled your winch in your off time, then they're going to be really upset with you about that. So take the time to respool your winch line now on your checklist. And next up, let's check your tire pressure on your tow rig, your trailer, and your vehicle. And check the trailer hubs and grease them if necessary. So the tires and hubs on your trailer and your truck, if you're towing, are just as important, if not more important, than your Jeep. So keep that in mind. And last but not least, you want to inspect your headlights and your light bars for those night rides. So there's been a few times where everybody's like, let's go on a night ride, and I go to turn my lights on and oh no, they're not working. So what do I have to do? I have to just follow real close and try to keep up and use the other person's headlights. That's not fun. So make sure that your headlights and light bars are in working order beforehand. All right guys, that is my pre-ride and post-ride checklist. If you manage to do all those things before your next adventure, you're going to be a lot better off than the other guy who didn't. So stop procrastinating like I always do. Do as I say, not as I do, and get those things done before your next adventure. Now, I'm sure there's a few things that I did miss, and I would like for you to tell me what they are. In the comments box down below, tell me some things that I missed on the pre-ride and post-ride checklist. Also, I'm going to leave some links over here, down here in the description box, and there should be some videos popping up soon right over here. That might help you out. Some things like the things that I carry in my toolbox, the kind of tools that I carry, the spare parts that I carry. I've got a video on how to see if you have bad ball joints, some of the things that we discussed in this video, a little more detailed. Also, we're giving away an FC. This is the next build in our series, and it's pretty awesome. If you'd like to get in on that, there's no purchase necessary, or you can support us either way. It's bleepinjeep.com/giveaway. It's pretty exciting, a Jeep Forward Control FC. All right, thank you guys so much for watching. Hit the thumbs up, like, subscribe, share, and we'll see you in the next video.